Shalom, family. This is Yuda Yasharel. You know, for most of my life, especially growing up, not knowing anything about the Bible or the Torah, I was always under the impression that my people were the outsiders. And at that time, I believed that those people over in Israel today, claiming to be the Jews, I actually thought they were. And I used to wonder about who I was and why could I not be the chosen or part of the chosen family. And as a young kid growing up, that was very disturbing to me. I had no clue, and I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of other people that grew up feeling and thinking the same way. And it was so strange that I felt like I was insignificant. And I can remember times when I tried my best to fit into the church, but I never felt right. It always felt like something was wrong. And so I ended up thinking that the Most High did not love me. But I never gave up seeking Him as the Creator. And it wasn't until much later in my life that I discovered or began to discover the truth, pieces at a time. So it took a long time for me to put all those pieces together in order to end up where I am today. So in this lesson today, we're going to touch on several topics. I guess you could say this is 2 or 3 lessons in one. But we're going to talk about Israel, the nation that is soon to return, and why there is no need to fear. So in the beginning, we're going to start out talking about these people who claim to be the creators of Israel. So let's start with my inserts. The creation of Israel, 1948. They claim to have created Israel. So let's dive into those who claim to have created Israel. On May 14th, 1948, David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish agency, proclaimed the establishment of the State of Israel. The U.S. President Harry S. Truman recognized the new nation on the same day. How can the nation of Israel be new? And even more, how can these people claim to have created this new nation? And since when was Israel a new nation? The Most High destroyed Jerusalem during the era of Baruch and said it would remain desolate. So my first question, since the Creator destroyed Jerusalem, who restored it? Was it these so-called white people? It surely was not the Most High. And here's the proof of that destruction. Baruch is told by the Most High that all of the things which happened to the northern 10 tribes will happen to the south as well. Jerusalem will fall, and the people will be punished. Baruch agrees this punishment cannot be resisted, but asks the Most High what will happen after the city is destroyed, are the promises of the Most High ever to be fulfilled? The Most High's answer is that a new Jerusalem has been built, but is in paradise. How about that? Baruch had no idea that before the creation of Adam, the Most High had already built a new Jerusalem and had put it in paradise. So Baruch was confused because the Most High was telling him that he was going to destroy Jerusalem. Now, as far as Baruch was concerned, this is the only Jerusalem he ever knew. He had no idea the Most High had already, long before him, long before Adam, had created a brand new Jerusalem and had placed it in his paradise. So in chapter 5 and chapter 9, Baruch prepares for the Babylonian invasion. He tells the people what the Most High has told him. And they sit in the valley of Kidron and fast until evening. The city is surrounded the next day in chapter 6. Baruch sees 4 angels at the corners of the city with burning torches. He sees the temple and the Holy of Holies, including the ephod, precious stone, and other temple items. Baruch was concerned about these particular things, these items, because he knew that if Babylon ransacked Jerusalem, they would carry these items away. These buildings are swallowed up by the earth. Then the angels put their torches to the city and destroyed its foundations. Babylon enters the city and plunders it and kills many people. You see, so what happened here? The Most High opened up the earth and swallowed up everything that was important to him. And then the angels came behind him and they torched everything, destroyed it down to its very foundations. So when the Babylonians got there, it was already destroyed. See, the Most High was not going to let them have the satisfaction of being the ones that destroyed his city. So he did it beforehand. The word of the Most High comes to Baruch, and he is commanded to tell Jeremiah to go to support the captives in Babylon. Baruch delivers a lengthy lament for the city in chapter 9, striking many themes found in the later apocalyptic, better never to have been born, in verse 6, for example. He condemns Babylon, although it is not as brutal as it might be. He asks how the Most High has borne this destruction of the city. That was in chapter 11 and 12. As Baruch weeps for fallen Jerusalem, the Most High will answer his questions through a series of visions. So we can see the Creator has completely destroyed Jerusalem. So let's continue investigating the claims of the heathens. And at the end of this lesson, we will look at the Creator's answer to Baruch's visions, or his questions, along with my projections of context and history of the Catholic Church and the Roman Empire. So back to these heathens that claim to have created a new nation. The Rothschilds purchased the land where these impostors dwell today, which they call Jerusalem. It's not the true land. The Rothschilds began purchasing land from the early 1800s. They purchased this particular land around 1944 or 1945 with the intent to further the deception of the true Israelites. So let's take a look at this brief summary below that I found in my research. The Jewish people had scattered across the world following the Roman persecution in the 2nd century AD, leaving Palestine where their ancestors Abraham had come from. A group amongst them, the Jewish, pursued the ideal of a homeland following the 19th century popularity of establishing a nation state. Yeah, they established what they call Jerusalem today. The Most High had nothing to do with that. As one of the wealthiest families in the world, the Rothschilds were one of the financiers of this aim. The Rothschilds, who made a fortune through banking since the 18th century, are a German Jewish family whose members fled to European countries, some even receiving the title of nobility. These Jewish nationalists, or Zionists, as they like to be called, gathered in Basel, Switzerland in 1897, and turned to England, at the time the most powerful country at that time. They turned to them for the help of establishing a homeland in Palestine, their promised land, not ours, as it says in the Torah, or at least as they say. This is also mentioned in the Quran, Surah Ma'idah, chapter 5. Zion is the name of the hill on which Bayat al-Maqdis was built by the prophet Solomon, where Jerusalem is or was located. Do y'all see any Jews in this crowd? There's not one black face in this crowd. And if we know anything, we know because of Deuteronomy that we are the people. And we're not white. Theodor Hertz, at the First Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland, August 25th, 1897, the Ottoman government took certain measures against the movement which threatened its territorial integrity. It feared that the law of 1869, which allowed foreigners to buy land in the Ottoman country, except for in Hijaz, on condition of reciprocity, would be abused. In 1871, 80% of Palestine was turned into state land. At that time, several thousand Ottoman Jews were living in Palestine. Operation Rothschilds. In 1881, the Jews who faced the pogrom in Russia wanted to immigrate to Palestine in Marseille. And they wanted world-famous people of Jewish origin to finance it, like the Rothschilds and the Hertz families. This is called Aliyah in Zionist literature. In response, Sultan Abdul Hamid II issued an edict banning Jews from resettling in Palestine in April 1882. It allowed them to settle anywhere else in the empire, though no more than 150 families. He then started to buy strategic lands in Palestine. And when I say he, I'm talking the Rothschild. He then started to purchase strategic lands in Palestine through his personal treasury called the Hazin Ahasa. From 1882, the Rothschilds began to buy land in Palestine on behalf of others. The Rothschilds, who had international power as they lent money to all the governments, every single government on the planet, the Rothschilds had leverage on them. They lent money to all governments. They wanted the refugee Russians to be the refugee Russians, Jews, to be allowed to settle in these lands. The embassies intervened. The Ottoman government was confused as to what to do. The first Jewish colony was established in Jaffa that same year. Despite not having been granted permission, by 1918, 1/20th of Palestine's fertile lands belonged to the Rothschilds. Now, the reason there's so much disturbance in that region up to this very day is because of what this man right here said. This is a quote from Gamal Abdel Nasser, the president of Egypt during this time. In 1958, President Nasser of Egypt said of the Jews, there can never be peace in this region because the Jews left here black and came back white. This man was assassinated for making that remark. Now, before we get into Jeremiah, let's examine a couple of things of interest. When was the New Testament written? And I'm bringing this up for a particular reason. And I'll show you here in just a few seconds. When was the New Testament written? The New Testament has 27 books, written between 50 and 100 AD. When was the last book of the Old Testament written? Chronologically, the last of the Old Testament books written was Malachi, which was penned about 450 BC. Do you see the gap between here and here? What is that, about 350 years? Why am I bringing this up? Watch this. Jeremiah chapter 30. This is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Most High. This is what the Most High, the Father and Creator of Israel, says. Write in a book. Did y'all catch that? Write in a book, not some books. Why am I focused on this? Let's go back up here. The New Testament was written between 50 and 100 AD, 350 years apart. So they couldn't have been written at the same time, and they could not have been part of each other. So this book, the New Testament, is separate from this book, which means they have nothing to do with each other. We're going to see later on when the Most High, when Baruch specifies the Torah only. So if the New Testament was an authentic book, it would have most definitely been included in the Torah, because the Most High says he wants, let's read it. This is what the Most High said, write in a book. That's a singular term. Write in a book all, that's every word that I have spoken to you. So all that he spoke to the prophets of old could not have been in this book. It could not have been in that book. He says, write in a book all the words. That means every word he spoke. This explains why when the last book of the Torah was written in Malachi, the Most High went silent. There is nowhere in the New Testament that you can point out, thus saith the Most High. So that not only eliminates the fake book, but it also eliminates JC, or Jesus, as they call him. He says, the days are coming, declares the Most High, when I will bring my people Israel and Judah back from captivity and restore them to the land I gave their ancestors to possess, says the Most High. So that could not mean that these people, the Rothschilds, they brought those people to that land that they call Jerusalem. The Most High did not have nothing to do with that. The Most High says that he said that when I will bring, I, singular, he did not appoint the Rothschilds or anybody else to do this for him. He says, when I will bring my people Israel and Judah back from captivity and restore them to the land I gave their ancestors to possess. These are the words the Most High spoke concerning Israel and Judah. This is what the Most High says. Cries of fear are heard, terror, not peace. Ask and see, can a man bear children? Then why do I see every strong man with his hands on his stomach like a woman in labor? Every face turned deathly pale. And this word pale, for your information, is not referring to light skin. This word used in this analogy is referring to fear. So let's not get it twisted. I've had a lot of people debate on this very issue. When they see that word pale, they immediately say, well, it couldn't have meant Israel being a black race because they can't turn pale. But Israel can fear. And that's what this word is referring to. Fear, not the shade of your skin. How awful that day will be, no other will be like it. It will be a time of trouble for Jacob. Isn't that where we are today? I mean, think about it, people. Are we not experiencing the most troublesome time of our entire history? Look at what's going on around you today. You can't drink water without being poisoned. All of your foods are fake. They're all synthetics, made in a lab with GMOs and other harmful ingredients. It will be a time of trouble for Jacob, but he will be saved out of it. In that day, declares the Most High Almighty, I will break the yoke off their necks and will tear off their bonds. That hasn't happened yet. No longer will foreigners enslave them. Instead, they will serve the Most High, their Creator, and David, their King, whom I will raise up for them. So just looking at this alone, it is a definite, guaranteed promise that Israel will return. So do not be afraid, Jacob, my servant. Do not be dismayed, Israel, declares the Most High. I will surely save you out of a distant place, your descendants from the land of their exile. Jacob will again have peace and security, and no one will make him afraid. I am with you and will save you, declares our Creator. Though I completely destroy all the nations among which I scatter you, I will not completely destroy you. In other words, if you look at this word completely, he's saying some of you are going to be destroyed. But I'm not going to destroy the whole nation completely, just some of you. I will discipline you, but only in due measure. I will not let you go entirely unpunished. So even those that he don't destroy, they will still be punished. But listen, but you, O Israel, shall be healed. Jeremiah chapter 30. This is what the Most High says. Your wound is incurable, your injury beyond healing. There is no one to plead your cause, no remedy for your sore, no healing for you. All your allies have forgotten you. They care nothing for you. I have struck you as an enemy would and punished you as you would the cruel. Because your guilt is so great and your sin so many. Why do you cry out over your wound, your pain that has no cure? Because of your great guilt and many sins, I have done these things to you. But all who devour you will be devoured. All your enemies will go into exile. Those who plunder you will be plundered. All who make spoil of you, I will despoil. But I will restore you to your health. I'm going to make you healthy again after I punish you, after I heal your wounds. But I will restore you to health and heal your wounds, declares the Most High. Because you are called an outcast, Zion, for whom no one cares. This is what the Most High says. I will restore the fortunes of Jacob's tents and have compassion on his dwellings. The city will be rebuilt on her ruins, and the palace will stand in its proper place. That is not the land that these fake Ashkenazi Jews are on. He says, and the palace will stand in its proper place. From them will I come, from them will come songs of thanksgiving and the sound of rejoicing. I will add to their numbers, and they will not be decreased. I will bring them honor, and they will not be disdained. Their children will be as in days of old, like it used to be, and their community will be established before me. Israel will return, and it's soon. I will punish all who oppress them. Their leader will be one of their own. Their ruler will arise from among them. I will bring him near, and he will come close to me. For who is he who will devote himself to be close to me, declares the Most High. So you will be my people, and I will be your creator, your father. See, the storm of the Most High will burst out in wrath. Mentioning the storm, this is happening right this moment. Me and my wife, we spend nights watching all of these chaotic weather patterns all over the world, hitting the countries that had anything to do with slavery. That driving wind is swirling down right now on the heads of the wicked. The fierce anger of the Most High will not turn back until he fully accomplishes the purpose of his heart. In days to come, you will understand this. At that time, declares the Most High, I will be the father of all the families of Israel, and they will be my people. This is what the Most High says. The people who survive the sword will find favor in the wilderness. I will come to give rest to Israel. The Most High appeared to us in the past, saying, I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with unfailing kindness. I will build you up again, and you, virgin Israel, will be rebuilt. Again, you will take up your timbrels and go out to dance with the joyful. Again, you will plant vineyards on the hills of Samaria. The farmers will plant them and enjoy their fruit. There will be a day when watchmen cry out on the hills of Ephraim, come, let us go up to Zion, to the Most High, our Creator. This is what the Most High says. Sing with joy for Jacob. Shout for the foremost of the nations. Make your praises heard and say, Most High, save your people, the remnant of Israel, the remnant of Israel. See, I will bring them from the land of the north and gather them from the ends of the earth. Among them will be the blind and the lame, expectant mothers and women in labor. A great throng will return. They will come with weeping. They will pray as I bring them back. I will lead them beside streams of water on a level path where they will not stumble, because I am Israel's father, and Ephraim is my firstborn son. Ephraim is his son, even his firstborn. Now let's look into Baruch. I mentioned him briefly in the beginning of this. So what I want to do now is we're going to go through some of the things that Baruch experienced during the Babylonian captivity. Second Baruch, the book of the apocalypse of Baruch. And the word apocalypse, for your information, as most people think, they think it means some disaster. Apocalypse means to reveal, to show the coming judgment. Now, in this part of the lesson, we will see why we're having the weather patterns that we're witnessing today. And there are none like we've ever witnessed before. These things happening now are astronomically terrible. For behold, the days come, and the books shall be opened, in which are written the sins of all those who have sinned. And again, also the treasuries, in which the righteousness of all those who have been righteous in creation is gathered. For it shall come to pass at that time that you shall see, and the many that are with you, the long suffering of the Most High, which has been throughout all generations, who has been long suffering towards all who are born alike, those who sin and those who are righteous. And as I answered and said, but behold, O Most High, no one knows the number of those things which have passed, nor yet of those things which are to come. For I know indeed that which has befallen us, but what will happen to our enemies, I know not. And when will you visit your works. Sign of the coming judgment. And Baruch answered and said, I'm sorry. And the Most High answered and said unto Baruch, you too shall be preserved till that time, till that sign which the Most High will work for the inhabitants of the earth in the end of days. This therefore shall be the sign when a stupor. Now, just to be clear on this, I took the liberty to get the definition so that there will be no misunderstanding what this sign means. When a stupor. So what does it mean to be a stupor? A stupor can be a serious mental state where people don't respond to normal conversations. Instead, they respond only to physical stimulation, such as to pain or rubbing on their chest, which is known as a sternal rub. This is what I see in the majority of our people today. They don't have normal conversations. And if y'all could see some of the comments left on my channel, it is pure stupor. So, continuing from this sign, when a stupor shall seize the inhabitants of the earth, and they shall fall into many tribulations, and again when they shall fall into great torment, and it will come to pass when they say in their thoughts by reason of their much tribulation, the mighty one does no longer remember the earth. Yes, it will come to pass when they abandon hope, that the time will then awake. And I answered and said, will that tribulation which is to be continued? Let me read that again. And Baruch answered and said, will that tribulation which is to be continue a long time? And will that necessity embrace for many years? This is the response. The 12 woes that are to come upon the earth, the Messiah and the temporary Messianic kingdom. And he answered, the Most High answered to Baruch and said unto him, into 12 parts is that time divided, and each one of them is reserved for that which is appointed for it. In the first part, there shall be the beginning of commotions. Have we not seen the beginning of commotions? If you don't know what I'm talking about, remember back a little ways on the COVID-19. Remember back on the COVID-19. And in the second part, there shall be slayings of great ones. The great ones are referring to the nation of Israel. And is it not true that our men and women and young men and young women being slain in the streets, and their slayers are pronounced not guilty? And in the second part, there shall be slayings of the great ones. And in the third part, the fall of many by death. And in the fourth part, well, let's look at the fourth part. And in the third part, in the third part, the fall of many by death. Can anybody count how many millions have died from the, you know what, the poke? I can't say the word because I might get flagged. But y'all know by the reports, millions, and they're still dropping like flies. So I'm going to read that again. And in the third part, the fall of many by death. And in the fourth part, the sending of the sword. And in the fifth part, famine and the withholding of rain. And in the sixth part, earthquakes and terrors, wanting. And in the eighth part, a multitude of specters and attacks of the Sheddim. And in the ninth part, the fall of fire. And in the 10th part, rapine and much oppression. And in the 11th part, wickedness and unchastity. And in the 12th part, confusion from the mingling together of all those things. These things up here that I just read are catastrophes, weather catastrophes, killings, murders, you name it. So these things are all mingled together of all those things that were said afore up here. For these parts of that time are reserved and shall be mingled one with another and minister one to another. For some shall leave out some of their own and receive in its stead from others. In other words, let me break this down for you. We're talking about tornadoes happening in places that normally don't have tornadoes. And not only are they having tornadoes, but they are having other catastrophes, such as floods. Mixing, these two things are mixing together, mingle one with another, and they minister one to another. The tornado ministers to the flood. We're having earthquakes. And at the same time, we're having hurricanes and floods right along with the earthquakes. They are ministering to each other. For some shall leave out some of their own and receive in its stead from others, and some complete their own and that of others, so that those may not understand who are upon the earth in those days, that this is the consummation of the times. We are at the end. So now let's look at Baruch's vision, because he asked the Most High if he would explain to him the visions that were brought to him in his sleep. And this is what Baruch said. And when I had said these things, I fell asleep there. And I saw a vision in the night, and lo, a forest of trees planted on the plain, and lofty and rugged rocky mountains surrounded it. And that forest occupied much space, and lo, over against it arose a vine, and from under it there went forth a fountain peacefully. Now that fountain came to the forest and was stirred into great waves, and those waves submerged that forest, and suddenly they rooted out the greater part of that forest and overthrew all the mountains which were round about it. And the height of the forest began to be made low, and the top of the mountains was made low, and that fountain prevailed greatly, so that it left nothing of that great forest save one cedar only. Also, when it had cast it down and had destroyed and rooted out the greater part of that forest, so that nothing was left of it, nor could its place be recognized, then that vine began to come with the fountain in peace and great tranquility. And it came to place which was not far from that cedar. And they brought the cedar which had been cast down to it. And I beheld, and lo, that vine opened its mouth and spoke, and said to that cedar, Are you not that cedar which was left of the forest of wickedness, and by whose means wickedness persisted, and was wrought all those years, and goodness never? And you did keep conquering that which was not yours, and to that which was yours you did never show compassion. And you did keep extending your power over those who were far from you, and those who drew near you. You did hold fast in the toils of your wickedness. And you did uplift yourself always as one that could not be rooted out. But now your time has sped, and your hour has come. Do also therefore depart, O cedar, after the forest which departed before you, and become dust with it. And let your ashes be mingled together, and now recline in anguish, and rest in torment till your last time come in, which you will come again, and be tormented still more. And after these things, Baruch saw that cedar burning, and the vine glowing, itself and all around it, the plain full of unfading flowers. And I indeed awoke and arose. So here we have a vision concerning trees, a forest, mountains, a cedar tree, a vine, and a fountain. For those who have spiritual vision, let your discernment begin. Let us consider what Baruch was told from here. And I prayed and said, O Most High, my Creator, you do always enlighten those who are led by understanding. Your Torah is life, not your New Testament. Your Torah is life. How many people can actually understand what is right here in your face? Baruch is telling you, your Torah is life. That's the only book that is ever mentioned by any of the Torah people from beginning to the end at Malachi. Nobody ever mentioned any New Testament. Nobody ever mentioned any Jesus. None of the prophets, none of the people, none of their prophecies. They were taken and plagiarized and twisted into this new book, which is this God who come newly up. Baruch says, your Torah is life, and your wisdom is right guidance. Make known to me, therefore, the interpretation of this vision. For you know that my soul has always walked in what? Your Torah. So let me just stop here for a second and ask a question. These prophets in the Torah only refer to the Torah, and as Baruch says, that his soul has always walked in his Torah. He did not include any other book, yet he was a righteous man. Somebody please help me understand, why do our people feel that they need a new book if the old one was sufficient? That's the million-dollar question. That's the million-dollar question. And from my earliest days, I departed not from your wisdom. Where is his wisdom? Where is his wisdom? It's in the Torah. That's the only place you will find the Most High's wisdom. It is then the revealing of the Most High which continues from here, giving us the true meaning of the vision, the interpretation of the vision. And he answered and said unto me, Baruch, this is the interpretation of the vision which you have seen. As you have seen the great forest with which lofty and rugged mountains surround it, this is the word. Behold, the days come, and this kingdom will be destroyed, which once destroyed Zion. and it will be subjected to that which comes after it. Moreover, that also again, after a time, will be destroyed, and another, a third, will arise. Now we know where they got the book of Revelation from. And that also will have dominion for its time and will be destroyed. This word begins with the inference that the great forest with lofty and rugged mountains surrounding it means the kingdoms of dominance among the populations of the world. The reference goes immediately to that kingdom which once destroyed Zion. That kingdom would be Babylon. And listen, for 1 second, do not think Babylon is confined to one area. It is America and all of its allies. All of its Babylon. That kingdom would be Babylon, the kingdom which burnt the first temple. The prophecy then tells us that Babylon would be subjected to that which comes after it. Historically, this is true, as Daniel reveals, because Babylon fell to the Medo-Persian Empire. However, this prophecy goes on to reveal that the Medo-Persian Empire also again, after a time, will be destroyed, and another, a third, will arise, and that also will have dominion for its time and will be destroyed. The kingdom which would come to destroy the Medo-Persian Empire would, of course, be the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great, which too was destroyed by the Roman Empire. Now let us see what is revealed about Rome. And after these things, a fourth kingdom will arise, whose power will be harsh and evil far beyond those which were before it. And it will rule many times as the forest on the plain. And it will hold fast for times and will exalt itself more than the cedars of Lebanon. And by it the truth will be hidden. So you wonder why people say, you wonder who gave us the understanding that the book of Yasher, the book of Jubilees, the book of Enoch are all pseudepigrapha. Who did that? I'm going to show you who did it. I'm going to show you who said, oh, those books, you shouldn't read those. They're all false. They're all pseudepigrapha. All right? Listen to this. And by it, the truth will be hidden. And all those who are polluted with iniquity will flee to it, as evil beasts flee and creep into the forest. The fourth kingdom to arise in this prophecy, the fifth kingdom discussed, is Rome. It is described as a kingdom whose power will be harsh and evil, far beyond those which were before it. Does this prophecy hold true given the historical record? This prophecy states that this kingdom will rule many times, and that it will hold fast for times, and will exalt itself more than the cedars of Lebanon. Has Rome exalted itself? Yes. Consider the difference between the Eastern churches, which began at Antioch, Damascus, Jerusalem, and Alexandria, all of which call themselves Orthodox, which means correct, and the Roman Church, which calls itself Catholic, which means universal. The leader of this institution refers to himself as Vicarius Filio Dei, meaning in place of the Son of God. Whether or not you agree with such statements, the relevant inquiry here is, has this institution exalted itself above the cedars of Lebanon? Yes. For just a moment, let's make an inquiry into the charge that Rome would come to be harsh and evil far beyond those which were before it. Here is a bit of discussion on the Roman Catholic Inquisition. In the year 1244, the Council of Narbonne ordered that in the sentencing of heretics, which is what they call most people who express their faith, no husband should be spared because of his wife, nor wife because of her husband, and no parent spared from a helpless child. Once in custody, the victims await before their judge anxiously, while he pondered through the document of their accusation. During the first examination, enough of their property was likewise confiscated to cover the expenses of the preliminary investigation. The accused would then be implicated and asked incriminating and luring questions in a dexterous manner of trickery calculated to entangle most. Many manuals used and promulgated were by the Grand Inquisitor Bernardus Guidonis, the author of Practica Inquisition, Practice of Inquisition, and the Directorium Inquisitorum, Guideline for Inquisitors, completed by Nicholas Emeric, Grand Inquisitor of Aragon. These were the authoritative textbooks for the use of inquisitors until the issue of Torquemadas. Instructions in 1483, which was an enlarged and revised directorium. A chapter of the manual is headed of the torture and contains these small reflections. The torture is not an infallible method to obtain the truth. There are some men who, Pusillanimous, I guess I'm pronouncing that right, Pusillanimous, that at the first twinge of pain, they will confess crimes they never committed. Others there are so valiant and robust that they bear the cruelest torments. Those who have once been placed upon the rack suffer it with great courage because their limbs accommodate themselves to it with facility or resist with force. Others, with charms and spells, render themselves insensible and will die before they confess anything. The author gives further directions. When sentence of torture has been given, and while the executioner is preparing to apply it, the inquisitor and the grave person who assists him should make fresh attempts to persuade the accused to confess the truth. The executioners and their assistants, while stripping him, should affect uneasiness, haste, and sadness, endeavoring, though thus to instill fear into his mind. And when he is stripped naked, the inquisitor should take him aside, exhorting him to confess and promising him his life upon condition of his doing so, provided that he is not a relapse or dilated a second time, because in such a case they cannot promise him that. Later, afterwards, in the 16th century, Cardinal Giovanni Carafa, a zealot for the purity of Catholicism, who later became the Pope himself, also held a stern and gloomy view of moral rectitude for heretics. In 1542, he was appointed by Pope Paul III to administer the Inquisition. The manuscript of Carafa gives the following rules drawn up by Carafa himself. Firstly, when faith is in question, there must be no delay. But at the slightest suspicion, rigorous measures must be resorted to with all speed. Secondly, no consideration is to be shown to any prince or prelate, however high his situation. Thirdly, extreme severity is rather to be exercised against those who attempt to shield themselves under the protection of the potentate potentate. And fourthly, no man must lower himself by showing toleration towards heretics of any kind. Refusing to confess at the first hearing saw heretics being remanded to prisons for several months. The dungeons were situated underground so that the outcries of the subject might not reach other parts of the building. In some medieval cells, the inauspicious were bound in stocks or chains, unable to move about and forced to sleep standing up on forced to sleep standing up or on the ground. In some cases, there was no light or ventilation. Inmates were generally starved and kept in solitary confinement in the dark and allowed no contact with the outside world, including that of their own family. In 1252, Pope Innocent VI officially authorized the creation of the horrifying Inquisition torture chambers. It also included a new perpetual imprisonment or death at the stake without the bishop's consent. Acquittal of the accused was now virtually impossible. Thus, with a license granted by the Pope himself, inquisitors were free to explore the depths of horror and cruelty. They could do whatever they pleased. Dressed as black-robed friends with black cowls over their heads, inquisitors could extract confessions from just about anyone. The Inquisition invented every conceivable device to inflict pain by slowly dismembering and dislocating the body. Many of the devices were inscribed with the motto, "Glory be only to God." Can you believe that? Can you believe that? Bernardus Guidodonis, the inquisitor in Toulouse, instructed the layman as to never argue with the unbeliever, but as to thrust his sword into the man's belly as far as it will go. George Riley Scott describes how the inquisitors gorged their inhumanity and developed a degree of callousness rarely rivaled in the annals of civilization. With the ecclesiastical authorities condemning every faith outside of Christianity as demonic. Y'all get that? With the ecclesiastical authorities condemning every faith outside of Christianity as demonic. In other words, you better not say anything about the true creator or any other religion. Even the very fact of having a charge brought against you and of being summoned to the Inquisition was sufficient to strike abject terror into the bravest man or woman. For very few who entered the doors of that hall of torment emerged whole in mind and body. If they escaped with their life, they were, with rare exceptions, maimed physically or mentally forever. Those who did happen to endure the dungeon generally went mad in captivity, screaming out in despair to escape their purgatories. Others willingly committed suicide during their confinement. The defendants were known to incriminate themselves at any chance they had to escape the horrors. As Henry Charles Lear describes, One of the conditions of escaping the penalties was that they stated all they knew of other heretics. In other words, snitch, tell on the rest, and apostates. Under the general terror, there was little hesitation in denouncing not only friends and acquaintances, but the nearest and dearest of kindred, parents, children, brothers, sisters. This ultimately indefinitely prolonged the Inquisition through their associates. In the ages of faith, when the priest was little less than a god himself, a curse from his lips was often more feared than physical torment. To even establish an accusation against a bishop itself required 72 witnesses. Against a deacon was 27 witnesses. Against an inferior dignitary was 7 witnesses. And for non-members of the clergy was 2 witnesses, sufficient to convict. Whole communities went mad with grief and fear of thought of being denounced for the Inquisition. It spread all over Europe. Men, women, and children, all legally murdered on evidence by a church, which today would only be accepted unless the court and jury specifically composed of the inmates of a lunatic asylum. Look at the horrors of the church. So as you can see, the worst possible abuses were practiced, all of which the Bill of Rights in the United States were written to prevent. The notion of man's inhumanity to man cannot be more clearly seen than in the harsh and evil practices of the Roman Church during this period. And you wonder why so many of our people are in Christianity or Catholicism. Look what would have happened if they said no. So the notion of man's inhumanity to man cannot be more clearly seen than in the harsh and evil practices of the Roman Church during this period. Let's continue with the discourse just a bit in order to ensure a proper recollection. In the early 1500s and 1600s, the Catholic Church went through a reformation. It consisted of 2 related movements: a defensive reaction against the Reformation, a movement begun by Martin Luther in 1517 that gave birth to Protestantism, or Protestants. A Catholic reform which saw Protestants declare war on Catholics. The Roman Catholic Church called the Council of Trent partly as a defense against Protestantism. In 1542, Pope Paul III, in 1534 and 49, established the Holy Office as the final court of appeal in trials of heresy. The church also published a list of books that were forbidden to read. Heretical books were outlawed and searched out by, how do you pronounce that? Domiciliary visits. Every book that came was scrutinized minutely with the express object of finding some passage which might be interpreted as being against the principles or interests of the Catholic faith. The circular coadjutor was also not allowed to learn to read or write without permission. No man was able to aspire to any rank above that of which he already held. The church insisted on this regulation as a means to obtaining perfect knowledge of its subordinates. The censorship of books, this is where it all started, y'all. The censorship of books took 3 forms: complete condemnation and suppression, the expunging of certain objectionable passages or parts. I'm sure y'all get what this is saying. You can tie this to the book, the Sefer, the book of Jubilees, Yasher, the book of Enoch. You can Baruch, Second Esdras, all of them, all the Apocrypha. This was censorship. The expunging of certain objectionable passages or parts, the correction of sentences, or the deletion of specific words as mentioned. A list of the various books condemned upon any of these three heads was printed every year, after which anyone found to be in the possession of a volume coming under Section 1 or an expurgated or uncorrected copy of a volume coming under Section 2 or 3 was deemed guilty and liable to serve punishment. The author and the publisher of any such book often spent the remainder of their lives in the dungeons of the Inquisitions. Its overall goal was to eradicate Protestant influences in Europe. A number of wars resulted from religious conflicts broke out, as well as the Catholic governments tried to stop the spread of Protestantism in the country. Such attempts led to the Civil War in France from 1562 to 1598 and a rebellion in the Netherlands between 1565 and 1648. Religion was a major issue in the fighting between Spain and England from 1585 to 1604. So y'all see, religion was a big deal. It's no wonder we're in the situation we're in. And do you really think these people are going to tell you the truth? Do you really think they're going to tell you the book of Enoch is real? Do you really think they're going to tell you the book of Yasher is real? No. Those are the books they don't want you to read because there's too much information. And this is what was going on then, holding back and hiding information. It was also a cause of the Trinity years, War 1618 to 1648. It was also a cause of the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648, which centered in Germany, that eventually evolved all of the great nations of Europe, having its population. The estimate of the death toll during the Inquisition ranged worldwide from 600,000 to as high as in the millions, covering a span of almost 6 centuries. Victor Hugo estimated the number of the victims of the Inquisition at 5 million. It is said, and certainly the number was much greater than that if we take into account, as we should, the wives and husbands, the parents and children, the brothers and sisters, and other relatives of those tortured and slaughtered by the priestly institution. To these millions should properly be added the others killed in the war, precipitated in the attempt to fasten the Inquisition upon the people of various countries, as the Netherlands and Germany. The horrors of the church and its Inquisition. This is a link. I don't think it's clickable. Well, it's a link to a lot of these horrors of the church and its Inquisitions. This discussion is of interest when it comes to the restoration of sacred scripture. Let me read that again. This discussion is of interest when it comes to the restoration of sacred scriptures. We see here a charge set forth historically that the Roman Church did in fact corrupt the written text, taking unto itself the option to rewrite. Let me highlight this. Taking unto itself to rewrite and edit, expunge, and omit text without. Let me read this again, y'all. That the Roman Church did in fact corrupt the written text, taking unto itself the option to rewrite, edit, expunge, and omit text with which it had disagreement. They didn't want you to read Enoch. They didn't want you to have the Apocrypha. They didn't want you to look at Yasher. They didn't want you to look at Jubilees. Their purpose, their plan, their agenda was to lead you into destruction. They want to get rid of you. Okay, this is the very definition of corruption. Further, under the edicts of the church, the works of Martin Luther, John Calvin, and others who were to be burned, and readers of their work to be persecuted, tortured, destroyed, and or killed. None of this escaped the purview of the Most High. Let's look at Baruch once more. And it will come to pass, when the time its consummation, that it should fall, has approached, then the principate of my Mashiach will be revealed, which is like the foundation and the vine. And when it is revealed, it will root out the multitude of its host. And as touching that which you have seen, the lofty cedar which was left of that forest, and the fact that the vine spoke those words with it, which you did hear, this is the word. The last leader of that time will be left alive, when the multitude of his hosts will be put to the sword, and he will be bound, and they will take him up to Mount Zion, and my Mashiach, my Messiah, will convict him of all his impieties, and will gather and set before him all the works of his host. And afterwards he will put him to death, and protect the rest of my people, which shall be found in the place which I have chosen. And his principate will stand forever, until the word of corruption is at an end, and until the times aforesaid are fulfilled. This is your vision, and this is its interpretation. Some will not escape this judgment. So now we see the true evil of the Roman Catholic Church and their attempt to hide the truth by removing books and tampering with Scripture. People, please listen. Any of you that have any doubt that Enoch, Yasher, the Book of Jubilees, Ezra, and all the books that have been claimed to be pseudographic, a pseudepigrapha, don't listen. The people who are telling you that are the people that want you destroyed. Shalom.